So, let's talk about India after its independence in 1947. This was a nation at a massive crossroads. Which path was it going to choose for its future? Was it a total fresh start, or were the ideas of its old rulers still kind of running the show? We're going to unpack the huge ideological choices that were on the table.
And this quote, wow, it just cuts right to the heart of the issue, doesn't it? The argument here is that real freedom isn't just about politics. It's about how you think. This really sets the stage for the core conflict we're digging into today. A nation trying to figure out its own identity after centuries of being ruled by someone else.
You know, this idea of a transfer of power, it's a really powerful one. It suggests that, yeah, the faces at the top changed, but the actual machinery of the state, the laws, the institutions, even the way people thought about things, that all stayed pretty much Western. And that created this immediate and really deep ideological clash right from the get-go.
Okay, so to really get a grip on this conflict, we've got to look at the two big paths India could have taken. Let's start with the one from within, the indigenous route, a vision for the nation that was totally rooted in its own ancient traditions.
At the heart of this indigenous path is a concept called Dharma. And it's super important we get this right because it's not just religion in the Western sense. The source presents it as this fundamental principle that holds literally everything together, from a person's individual duty all the way up to the order of the cosmos. It's talked about as the very soul of the civilization.
And this slide, well, it really lays out the fundamental difference in worldview we're talking about. On one side, you have the spirit, which is seen as the real deal, eternal, immortal, the true focus of life. And on the other side, you have matter, which is seen as just temporary. This focus on the spiritual is framed as the key thing that sets it apart from the materialism of the West.
And, you know, this whole philosophy wasn't just abstract. It shaped how society was seen. The source talks about ideas like Varna, which was about different roles in society, and Purushartha, the four aims of life. The main point was that society isn't this one uniform blob. Success wasn't about everyone chasing the same prize, but about each person fulfilling their own unique potential. A totally different way of looking at it.
All right, so that's one path, the indigenous one, but which road did India actually take? Now we have to look at the other option, what the source calls the borrowed route. These are the Western ideologies that, it argues, ended up shaping the new nation.
One of the first and biggest imported ideas was communism. The source points to this deeply materialistic philosophy as having a huge, powerful influence on India's leaders and intellectuals right after independence.
And you can see right away how this clashes, really clashes, with that spiritual framework of Dharma we just talked about. The source describes the Marxist view as one that sees everything through the single lens of class conflict, and its open opposition to religion, family structures, even the idea of a nation. That's presented as a direct attack on the traditional Indian way of seeing the world.
Now, this is a really important point the source makes. The difference between Westernization and modernization. They're not the same thing. Modernization is just about being practical, adopting new techniques because they work better. But Westernization is a belief system. It's the idea that the West is just better. The example here makes it so clear. Providing education for everyone, that's modernization. Insisting that education has to be in English, that's Westernization.
And well, if you're focused on materialism, it's a pretty short jump to the next big idea: consumerism. The core belief is simple, and we see it everywhere, right? Happiness comes from buying things. The more stuff you have, the happier you'll be.
And the source offers this brilliant counter-argument, using this incredibly powerful metaphor. Trying to satisfy your desires by consuming more is like pouring ghee or clarified butter onto a fire. It doesn't put the fire out, it makes it blaze even hotter. It just creates this endless cycle of always wanting more and more.
Okay, so from consumerism, we move on to what is maybe the most hotly debated, borrowed idea of them all: secularism.
So the source asks a really pointed question here. Did this idea, which came out of Europe's very specific history of fighting between the church and the state, did it even make sense on Indian soil? The argument presented is that it was completely alien to how India had functioned for centuries.
This slide kind of lays out the argument. You see, back in Enlightenment Europe, secularism was a tool to get the church out of government business. But the source claims that when this idea was brought to India, it got twisted. It was turned into something else entirely, a political tool that was allegedly used against the majority community.
So this all leads to a really big question, right? How did these Western ideas, materialism, communism, this particular version of secularism, how did they get so deeply embedded in the first place? The source says the answer is in how India's own history was written and taught.
Well, this is where the source brings up this academic field called Indology, which is basically the study of India, but by Western scholars. And it's portrayed here as much more than just an academic exercise. It's presented as the main tool that was used to reinterpret and basically redefine India's entire culture and history through a foreign Western lens.
And the impact, at least according to the source, was just massive. It levels some pretty heavy charges against the field, that it made up theories like the Aryan invasion to create divisions, that it deliberately downplayed how old and profound ancient Indian texts were, and that it tried to squeeze Indian society into a Marxist box of class conflict. And the end result of all this? An alleged inferiority complex and self-alienation, a people cut off from their own roots.
And that's where we're left, after looking at this huge clash of worldviews, one all about spirit, the other all about matter. The source leaves us with this fundamental, thought-provoking question. It really makes you think. To be truly free, does a nation have to make a choice between moving forward materially and holding on to its spiritual soul? What does it really mean for a nation to be free?